Let me tell you something most people will never figure out. The voice inside your head, the one that never shuts up, the one that narrates every single moment of your life, that voice is either your greatest weapon or your worst enemy. And here's the brutal truth. For most of us, we never consciously chose what that voice says. It just inherited a script written by our fears, our failures, and everybody else's opinions. But what if you could rewrite it? What if, in just 21 days, you could fundamentally alter the internal conversation running your life? That's exactly what I want to break down for you today. Not motivation, not positivity fluff. I'm talking about a structured daily practice of intentional self-talk that can literally reshape the neural pathways governing how you think, how you feel, and what you believe is possible for you. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something important, and I genuinely want you to answer this in the comments below. What is the one thing you say to yourself most often when things go wrong? What's that automatic phrase that shows up in your mind when you make a mistake, when you fail, or when life doesn't go according to plan? Write it below, because by the end of this, I want you to replace it with something that actually serves you. Now, let me set the foundation before we get into the actual practice. Neuroscientists at institutions like Johns Hopkins and the University of Michigan have spent decades studying self-talk, and what they found is nothing short of extraordinary. The language you use internally doesn't just reflect your mental state, it actively creates it. When you repeat a thought often enough, the brain begins to treat it as fact. It stops questioning it. It starts building a world around it. This is called cognitive entrenchment, and it's the reason why some people stay stuck in the same painful patterns for decades, even when every external circumstance changes around them. The brain is a prediction machine. It doesn't respond to reality as much as it responds to the story it expects. And your self-talk is the raw material for that story. Every single day, without realizing it, you're feeding your brain a script. The question is, whose script is it? Most people are walking around with a script written in childhood, a script written during moments of rejection, embarrassment, and fear, a script that was handed to them by parents who meant well, by teachers who were overstretched, by a culture that profits from your insecurity, and they're delivering that script on autopilot, day after day, reinforcing a version of themselves that was never true to begin with. That ends now. So here's what 21 days actually means and why that number matters. Research in neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to physically reorganize itself, suggests that consistent, deliberate repetition of new thought patterns begins to create measurable structural changes in the brain within 3 to 4 weeks. 21 days isn't a magical number plucked from thin air. It's the minimum threshold for a new neural pathway to start feeling natural, for a new habit to stop feeling like effort and start feeling like identity. But here's the critical distinction most people miss. It's not just about repeating positive affirmations. If you just repeat, "I am successful," while your subconscious mind screams, "That's a lie," you're not programming yourself, you're arguing with yourself. And the deeper, older voice always wins that argument. The method I'm going to give you today works differently. It bypasses the resistance. It speaks to the subconscious in a language it actually understands. There are 5 categories of self-talk I want you to practice every single day for 21 days. And I want you to do this deliberately, morning, midday, and night, 3 times a day minimum. Let me walk you through each one. The first category is identity statements, not affirmations, identity statements. There's a difference that changes everything. An affirmation says, "I am rich." An identity statement says, "I am someone who makes wise financial decisions every day." One is a wish, the other is a character description. The brain latches onto character. It will always move to protect and reinforce who it believes you are. So when you tell it who you are in behavioral specific terms, it begins organizing your thoughts, your attention, and your actions around that identity. Start here. Every morning, before you check your phone, before you drink your coffee, before you speak a single word to another human being, sit in silence for 60 seconds and say out loud, if you can, silently if you must, 3 identity statements. I am someone who takes care of my health because I respect my body. I am someone who does hard things without waiting to feel ready. I am someone who learns from every setback without letting it define me. These aren't abstract. They're behavioral. They're specific. And your brain will begin to treat them as operating instructions. The second category is what I call possibility language. Pay attention to how often you use the words I can't, I don't, and that's just how I am. These phrases are cognitive ceilings. Every time you use them, you're not describing a truth, you're issuing a command to your nervous system to stop looking for solutions. The brain is extraordinarily literal in this way. Tell it there's no way out and it stops searching for one. Tell it the door is open and it will look for the handle. Starting today, I want you to build the habit of catching those ceiling phrases and replacing them with what I call possibility questions, not statements, questions. Because a question opens a door, a statement closes one. Instead of, I can't focus, you say, what would help me focus right now? Instead of, I'm not good with money, you say, what's one decision I can make today that a financially smart person would make? Instead of, I always get anxious in social situations, you say, what's one thing I could do to feel more grounded before I walk into a room? This isn't denial. You're not pretending the struggle doesn't exist. You're redirecting the brain's processing power from the problem to the solution. And over 21 days, this becomes automatic. The default response to difficulty shifts from collapse to inquiry. That shift alone will change your life. The third category is emotional permission statements, and this one is the one most people skip and the reason most people's self-talk practice fails. Here's what no one tells you. If you speak to yourself with authority and confidence while internally feeling shame or guilt or fear, the body will override the words every single time. The emotional layer is deeper than the linguistic layer. You have to address both simultaneously. Emotional permission statements sound like this. It's okay that today was hard. Hard days don't define my direction. I allow myself to feel this frustration without becoming it. I don't need to have it all figured out to keep moving forward. I am allowed to be a work in progress. These statements do something remarkable. They create psychological safety. And without psychological safety, the mind cannot learn, cannot adapt, cannot grow. When you're in a state of self-condemnation, the brain is in threat response mode. It's not absorbing new information. It's defending itself. But when you give yourself permission, real felt permission to be imperfect and still worthy, the nervous system relaxes. And in that relaxed state, genuine transformation becomes possible. Do this especially at night. Before you sleep, do a 1-minute review of the day. Acknowledge what was difficult. Give yourself permission for the parts that were messy. And close with one forward-facing statement. Tomorrow I take one more step. That's it. That's enough. The fourth category is gratitude specificity, and I want to distinguish this sharply from generic gratitude, which has been so watered down by self-help culture that most people do it without feeling it at all. Generic gratitude sounds like I'm grateful for my health, my family, my home. And it's not wrong, it's just empty. The brain has heard it so many times, it processes it the way you process a car alarm. It registers it and moves on without any real neurological impact. Specific gratitude sounds like this. I'm grateful that this morning I woke up and for 30 seconds before the noise of the day began, I felt completely still. And I noticed it. I'm grateful that when I wanted to quit that conversation, I found one more moment of patience. I'm grateful for the specific feeling of sunlight on my face during my walk at 2 p.m. today. Specificity forces presence, and presence is where the brain is most receptive to new programming. When you practice specific gratitude daily, you're not just feeling good, you're training your brain to notice evidence of good. And what your brain notices, it amplifies. After 21 days of specific gratitude, you will literally perceive more positive detail in your daily life because you've taught your perceptual filters to look for it. The fifth and final category is what I call future self dialogue, and this one is the most powerful of all five. Most people think about their future self the way they think about a stranger. They'll get there eventually, they say. They'll deal with it when it comes. But that distance, that psychological gap between who you are now and who you want to become is the single greatest barrier to sustained change. When your future self feels abstract, sacrifice feels pointless. When your future self feels vivid and real and close, the sacrifices you make today feel meaningful. Here's what I want you to do. Once a day, ideally in the morning, spend 2 minutes speaking to your future self. Not about them, to them, directly, out loud. Say 6 months from now, when you look back at this period, you're going to be grateful that today you didn't quit, that today you chose differently, that today you started again. Speak to your future self with admiration, with belief, with the kind of warmth you'd offer a close friend who's doing hard, courageous work, because that's exactly what you are. And when you practice this consistently, something fascinating happens. The psychological distance collapses. Your future self starts to feel like you right now, and that creates a pull, a gravitational force toward the behaviors, the decisions, and the daily practices that serve that version of you. Now I want to address the single most common reason this kind of practice fails: inconsistency born from shame. What typically happens is this. Someone starts a 2-1-day practice with genuine enthusiasm. They do it day 1, day 2, day 3, then they miss a day, and instead of simply picking back up, they use the missed day as evidence that they're the kind of person who can't follow through. The internal critic arrives, says something like, "See, you always do this. You never stick with anything." And the practice collapses not from lack of discipline, but from lack of self-compassion. Here's what I need you to hear. Missing a day is not failure. It is data. It tells you something about what obstacles exist in your routine, in your environment, in your emotional state. You take that data, you adjust, and you continue. The 21 days don't have to be consecutive to be effective. What matters is direction. What matters is that you keep returning. Every single time you return after a lapse, you are training something more important than a habit. You are training resilience. You are proving to your subconscious that you are someone who comes back. Let me give you a complete sample of what a morning self-talk session looks like when you put all 5 categories together. This entire sequence takes less than 5 minutes. You wake up, before anything else, you sit up and you say out loud, "I am someone who shows up for the life I'm building, even on imperfect days." That's your identity statement. Then, what's one thing I can do today that moves me forward? That's your possibility question. Then I allow myself to be in process. I don't need to be finished to be valuable. That's your emotional permission. Then I'm grateful specifically for, and you name one precise sensory real detail from yesterday. And finally, future me, I'm doing this for you today. I know the work we're putting in now is the foundation of something real. 5 minutes, 5 categories, 21 days. If you do nothing else I've ever shared with you, do this. I also want to speak directly to the skeptics in the room because I respect you and you deserve a straight answer. Yes, you can find academic critics of self-affirmation theory. Yes, some studies have shown that positive self-statements can backfire in people with low self-esteem when delivered poorly. This is real, and I've already accounted for it in the structure I've given you. The reason the traditional affirmation model fails is because it creates cognitive dissonance, a gap between what you're saying and what you believe, without bridging that gap. That's why I've built in emotional permission work, possibility questions, and identity framing rather than declarative wishes. This approach works with your existing beliefs rather than against them, expanding them gradually rather than demanding an impossible overnight leap. The science of neuroplasticity is not fringe. It's mainstream neuroscience backed by decades of fMRI studies, longitudinal research, and clinical application in cognitive behavioral therapy. What you say to yourself repeatedly becomes what your brain expects. What your brain expects shapes what it perceives. What it perceives determines what you believe is possible. And what you believe is possible governs every action you take. This is not magic, this is mechanics. Now, before I close, I want to give you one final piece that ties everything together, because without it, the practice is a car without fuel. You have to mean it, not perfectly, not always, but you have to bring some genuine intention to this, even on the days you're going through the motions. Because here's the thing, the brain is a context-reading machine. It can tell the difference between something said mechanically and something said with even a trace of genuine belief, and that trace is enough to work with. You don't need full conviction. You need willingness. You need the part of you that isn't sure yet but is willing to be surprised. Show up with that, with the honest, imperfect, sometimes doubting but still trying version of yourself, and let the practice do what it's designed to do. Over 21 days, the willingness grows, the doubt shrinks. Not because you forced it to, but because you gave your brain enough new evidence to begin rewriting its expectations. This is how you change. Not dramatically, not overnight, not through some lightning bolt of inspiration, but through the quiet, daily, cumulative power of choosing a different internal conversation one day, one moment, one sentence at a time. So start today, not tomorrow, not when things calm down, not when you feel ready. Today, right now in the comments, I want you to write your first identity statement. One sentence that describes the person you are becoming. Write it in the present tense, write it in behavioral terms, and write it like you mean it, because you do. 21 days from now, come back to this video, read what you wrote, and notice what's different, because something will be. I promise.